Hello and welcome to Mr.EvilWakes. If you love scary stories to sleep to, you're in the right place. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment where you're watching from in the world. Now, relax, close your eyes, and let the rain carry you into the darkness.
Story 1. My 90-year-old grandfather told me something disturbing. "She's buried under that tree," my grandfather whispered, pointing out the window to the front lawn. Oh boy, I thought. Here we go again. For 90 years old, Grandpa was physically capable. He could move, do basic chores, and eke out a decent existence. His primary weakness was his mind. "Who's buried there?" I asked, humoring his senility as I adjusted the angle on his lift chair. "The girl with white hair and green skin." Green skin, I wondered. That's new. I fixed Grandpa's chair to the reclined position and made my way to the kitchen. "I'm gonna make us some sandwiches." "All right, sweetie." I left him there in front of the TV. This weekend was my monthly visit. My siblings and I switched weekends to make sure Grandpa wasn't alone. The location was inconvenient because he lived in the ass crack of nowhere. It was a good 2 hours to the nearest town. If you needed something other than general store items, you'd be driving for a while. After I finished the sandwiches, I slid one on a plate, and placed it in Grandpa's lap. "Thanks, honey," he said and started chewing with yellow teeth. I sat down on the sofa, cracked open a murder mystery book. A golf tournament was playing on TV. I hated golf, but that was the only thing he liked, so I occasionally glanced out the window at the beautiful vista to keep myself from boredom. Grandpa's property was strange in that it was high up in the mountains, appropriate for farming, but his specific land hadn't been built for that. He lived in a mobile home just beneath a hill. There were trees decorating the terrain, but the only one on his quarter-acre lawn was a pine my father had brought up years ago as a sapling. It was well over 12 feet now. "She's buried there," he mumbled, devouring a slice of ham on bread. Why does he keep saying that? I focused my gaze on the tree in the lawn. What an odd thing to hallucinate. 2 hours later, I was interrupted by a call from my brother, Stu. "Hey, Grace," he said, his voice as cheerful as ever. "How's Gramps?" "Coping," I said. Grandpa had fallen asleep in his chair, a half-eaten sandwich in his lap. "He's resting after a light lunch." "Good. He needs that." I returned to the couch, saved the spot in my murder mystery. My eyes fell on the lonely pine outside. "Stu, can I ask you something?" "Sure, sis. Has Grandpa mentioned anything about a green girl buried under a tree?" Stu fell silent. "Stu, give me a second. You there?" "Yeah. Just a minute," a heavy sigh. "When did he start mentioning it?" "This morning." "Don't let him talk about it." "Why not?" "Because he gets all worked up. When Jess and I were there last month, we found him digging a hole under the tree at 2 in the morning. He thinks someone lives down there. He belongs in a care home." I turned towards Grandpa, noted his frail shoulders, the muscles that had carried bales of hay and iron tools for years. Now his body was fading. "Grace, I'm still here. Make sure he doesn't talk about it." It was 5:15 when I cleared the plates from the dining table. "Thanks for cooking, sweetheart." "Of course, Grandpa. Need help getting to bed?" "No," he sighed, seemingly deep in thought. He pushed himself out of his seat, waddled down the hall. It took him so long to reach the other end of the trailer. "Grace," he stopped at this bedroom door. "Yes, you do believe me, about the girl under the tree?" "Yes, Grandpa." "Good. If anything happens, stay by my side. I'll protect you." "Huh." With that, Grandpa cracked open his bedroom door and slipped inside. FWACK. My eyes shot open. It was dark, maybe 1 in the morning. FWACK. A hard metallic noise thundered in my ears. What was that? FWACK. I stumbled out of bed. Disoriented, face aching with exhaustion, I ripped open the blinds. A man was swinging a tool at the foot of the pine tree. "Grandpa." I raced to his room. The bed was empty. FWACK. The metallic clangs grew louder. "What's happening?" I ran to the sofa, grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and stumbled outside. The moon was barely up. Cold air bit my skin as I pulled my shirt close, covering my body. Just ahead, Grandpa was hunched at the 12-foot pine, swinging a pickaxe. I was so stunned to see him lifting the massive tool. Grandpa, what are you? She's coming, Grace. I have to set her free. Grandpa, it's 3 in the morning. I have to get her out. I grabbed Grandpa's wrist, but he shoved me back. I landed on my posterior, my flashlight's beam illuminating his face, wide with terror. Don't stop me, Grace. If I don't let her out, she'll take you too. Without another word, he slammed his tool into the earth. The next morning, Grandpa and I sat at the table chewing bacon and eggs. Neither of us had slept. Grandpa. He looked at me with weariness in his eyes. What happened last night? He let out a deep sigh, pulled out a worn shoe box from a cabinet. See this. He brought out a stack of black and white photos. This is your grandmother, Belle, and me a few years after we were married. And here, he tapped the face of an adorable boy. Is your father. In the background of the picture, I noticed a young girl, maybe 4 years old, perched on a fence, watching everyone with a miserable gaze. Who's that? The green girl. She's the one who's buried under that tree. She took your father and grandmother. Now, she's coming for me. Why? Because she's deaf. Deaf. Asterisk. Boom. The front door lurched with sudden impact. Grandpa and I swerved our gazes, deep in fear and concentration. Didn't you think it was odd how Grandma died so young? And your father? Boom. This girl lived in the woods. She was there for each family member who passed on. Boom. My uncle, aunt, when I figured it out, I found her in the woods. Made sure she never came after us again. You killed a child. She's no child, Grace. She's evil. And she's coming for me. Boom. I ran to the couch. Peered out the window to see a hunched figure wearing old pioneer clothes. They were bashing their fists against the door. Someone's out there. It's all right, Grace. She only wants me. The slamming grew more intense. I retraced my steps to the table. Why is she harassing our family? I don't know, Grace. But it's been like that, ever since I was a boy. Whatever you do, don't make eye contact with her. Boom. The front door caved in under the pressure. I closed my eyes, then reopened them. A strange figure stood in the door frame. About 4 feet tall. Dressed in worn rags. Her skin was as green as a pine tree's leaves. Long white hair flowed down her back. She's here. The green girl shuffled toward us across the carpet. I watched in suspense, so scared I could barely breathe. My eyes searched for a weapon, and found a letter opener. I reached for it. Stop, Grace. This has to happen. I gawked in horror as the green girl lurched up to Grandpa, let out a blood-chilling gasp. H. The sound of her breath stung my ears. Grandpa commanded, only me. That's the deal. The green girl grabbed his face with bone-thin hands and held her mouth over his. A sickening sound of rushing wind accompanied her widening mouth. Grandpa gave a frightened gasp, then collapsed. Grandpa. The green girl let out a sickening groan. Limped back to the door. Wait. The creature looked at me. Why are you doing this? The green girl pointed at the clock hanging above the dining table. Then, pointed at herself, then me. For the next few seconds, I was too shocked to move. With a final groan, the green girl limped out the front door and was gone. It's been 2 days. I called the sheriff. They investigated everything. I've been asked so many questions. My siblings think I'm crazy. Stu's the only one who believes me. Why? He says that one night, while he was at Grandpa's, he heard a woman speaking in one of the rooms. It reminded him of a soothing voice he had once heard as a young boy. A voice that told him the exact date he would die. And that date wasn't far off. Story 2. My girlfriend never existed and I still miss her. I know how it sounds. I know I sound crazy. I'm not crazy. I'm not. About 2 years ago I was at a bar with my friends. I don't tend to go out and drink. I don't like clubs or raves or big events with loud music. I like people and socializing, but generally in a more relaxed environment like a house party or something. However, I was convinced to go out by one of my close friend Andrew. He was cheated on by his girlfriend about a week prior and he lived by the philosophy of, to get over someone you must get under someone new. I never understood that mentality, but since he was there for my last breakup I thought I'd be there for his. I spent most the night sipping on cheap whiskey I overpaid for in the back, watching my friend talk to this girl he's been trying to impress with his dance moves that seem to imitate the dance of a bird looking for a mate. Strangely enough, it seemed to be working. I wasn't really looking to find a girl myself. After my last relationship ended, I kinda swore of dating. Not really because it ended poorly, we are still friends vaguely, just too much to deal with emotionally at this point in my life. I felt like I needed to be by myself for a while longer to figure out who I am and what I truly want. Until that night when what I truly wanted accidentally bumped into me, spilling her drink all over me. I looked up and I saw her. She was panicking and apologizing about spilling her gin and tonic all over me, but I was just trying to catch my breath after she stole it with her eyes. I mean, this girl was gorgeous. Not supermodel statues or anything, but just something about her. She felt like the girl next door you'd have a crush on in elementary school when you first started to discover that girls don't have cooties, and if they did, it was worth getting. I remember this night vividly, like it happened yesterday. It was all so surreal. After the general apologizes that were shared, her for making my white button up with rose designs all over it soaked, and me for. Well, I don't know what I apologized for. I just felt like I should say sorry for breathing the same air as her. She finally asked me my name. Desmond. Hey Desmond, my name's Mary. We proceeded to talk all night. She was wonderful. She was a psychology major on her final year of her bachelor course, planning on getting her PhD and minoring in philosophy. She loved hiking, dogs, smoking weed, kids' cartoons. Her favorite thing to do, she said, was taking walks at night. She said it was just the perfect time to do so. Everyone's asleep, so it feels like the world is yours and just yours. She was funny in a witty pun way. We talked so long my friend's dance moves finally got the girl he's been talking to all night. He came up to tell me he was leaving and he's give me a ride home if I wanted, but I told him no thanks, I'll just walk home, I'm enjoying my time. Mary and I went on a walk that night until the sun came up. I swear I was already in love. We shared phone numbers and set up a coffee date in a couple days. Months went by and everything was going perfectly. Since I worked weekends and she went to school weekdays, the only time we could hang out was at nights. We watched movies at the theater, went on walks, cooked dinner at my place. We never went over to her apartment. She said she lived in one of those 4BDR with 4 random people places where everyone shares a common room and kitchen but pays for their individual room as rent. At nights they would throw parties that were filled with drunk college kids, or they would be up late in the common room studying with each other, so it was always my place we'd go to. She always had issues with her roommates, so I wasn't ever gonna push to go over there, cause frankly based on her stories I wouldn't like them much either. After about a year of dating, little over a year ago, she randomly knocked on my door. She was supposed to be studying for her midterms with her roommates, so wasn't expecting her, but I gladly let her in. She was crying something fierce. I quickly sat her down, asked her what happened while making her favorite caramel tea we get at a local tea shop. She explained to me that her and her roommates got into a massive fight and she had to get out of there. She talked about she hated living with them but she couldn't afford to move out. I, without skipping a beat, asked her to move with me. My lease was ending and I was already looking at this 2-bedroom outside of town that isn't too far away from her college and my work. We talked about it all night until she finally agreed with me that she would. Her biggest fear was she didn't have much money to help with the lease, which wasn't an issue to me seeing as I was planning on moving there with or without her. After she moved in, the first 3 months was amazing, everything went smoothly. She was happy, I was happy, we were learning to live with each other and grow with each other. I knew I was gonna marry her. Until things started getting weird. In the last 9 months, looking back in hindsight, there were dozens of instances that just felt off or out of nowhere. For example, she has met my parents, which my mom loved her, but I never met hers. When I asked her about it, she started to tear up and explain to me that they died when she was in middle school. She was on a field trip in school and when she got back her parents weren't there to pick her up. After waiting a while, she said a cop came up to her and told her that her parents died in a car wreck. Apparently on their way to pick her up, a semi T-boned them running a red and died on impact. She lived with her grandma until she was 17 and sadly her grandma got cancer and passed away right before her 18th birthday. I felt it to be strange that after a year and a half she is just now telling me, but I just assumed it was a touchy subject and left it there. Another strange thing I noticed is she didn't really have friends nor was interested in making them. I never heard any stories about them other than a classmate saying something funny or dumb in class. I tried to set up a double date with Andrew and Christy, the girl he met at the bar, but she usually had an excuse of being too tired from school or not the right time. It always felt like the only person she hung out with was me. In the last 2 months she started to become distant. It wouldn't be anything major, she just talk less, focus less on conversation. She didn't want to go on walks that much, she stayed late at school to study. She missed dinners more frequently, and most the time I wouldn't see her until I woke up in the morning and she was in bed next to me. I was planning on talking to her about this haze she was in, but I was praying that it was something harmless like her finals just eating up her time or stress of graduating afterwards and seeking employment. Our relationship was pretty solid, so I don't think it was her cheating on me or breaking up with me. However, I started to get worried the more and more she came late, or how much she slept in the day. She slowly stopped eating more than some fruits and snacks. I was worried she was getting sick, so I begged her to see a doctor to get a checkup. After a couple weeks of her saying she was fine but clearly wasn't, she gave in and told me to make an appointment. That appointment was set for last week, August 1st. It was set for 9:30 am, which doesn't seem early, but for 2 night owls it was a rough wake up. I got up to the alarm and went to roll over to wake her up, and she wasn't there. I figured she just didn't sleep well and woke up early, so I got up, got dressed and headed into the living room. No sign of her. I started to call out her name to be met with the silence of an empty apartment. I walked outside to see if she was out there or took our car somewhere, and our car was still there. I started to freak a little. I went to call her, but when I went to my phone her name wasn't in my contacts. It confused me because how could I accidentally delete a contact? I quickly dialed her number manually only to be met with, "This line has been disconnected or out of service." I started to tear up. At this point I assumed she ran away or something. It was the only logical excuse I had, but why go through the effort of deleting my contact in my phone just to disconnect hers? Why would she just leave? Nothing in our relationship was going badly, and I thought after all we've been through together I at the very minimum deserved a note or a conversation. Hell, an email. Just something. My brain went full force, so I called Andrew. He picked up, still hungover from the night before. I could tell because he still was slightly slurring his speech. "What's up bro, why you calling so early? You know I was at a party last night." Bro, she left, disconnected her phone, deleted her contact in my phone. She left, man, she just left. Who left? Mary. WHOLs. Calm down, man. First off, who's Mary? Are you fucking with me right now? This is not the time to mess with me. Dead ass dude, I don't know who Mary is. I'm not messing with you. My heart sank on that sentence. I was so confused, my mind racing a million miles a second, and none of it was making sense. What do you mean you don't know Mary? She's my girlfriend, the one I live with. The girl at the bar. We've been dating for 2 years. Dude, you haven't dated anyone since Jessica. Are you okay? Did you take any drugs last night? Do I need to go over there? I just hung up the phone. I just couldn't in that moment. I needed to go look for her. The first place that came to mind was the college. I sped over there as fast as I could and ran into the lobby of the main building. "Hi, can I help you with anything?" Yeah, I said in the calmest demeanor I could muster. "I'm looking for my girlfriend. I was seeing if she had any classes today or something." "What class would she be in and what's her name?" "Mary Fulbright, and I think the earliest class would be psychology with Professor Jackson." She started to clack on her keyboard for what felt like eternity. "Well, psychology class won't start until noon and Professor Jackson won't be here until 10, but I don't see any Mary Fulbrights on the attendance register." "What do you mean? She's on her master's right now. She's been going to this college for 5 years now. How could she not be on the registration?" "I don't know, sir, but I don't see her here. You can ask Professor Jackson when he arrives if you want to go to his room. It's room 312 in Building C." I sprinted out there and found the building and the room. I sat there trying to slow my shaking down. I could barely breathe. A mixture of fear and confusion was raging through my body to the point where it was the only thing I could notice. I barely caught Professor Jackson as he walked by me. I rushed to him. "Hey, I'm so sorry to bother you. The receptionist lady told me you'd be here soon. I was asking about my girlfriend, wondering if you'd know anyone she takes your first class." "Mary Fulbright. Who?" he responds, caught off guard and confused. "Mary, she is getting her master's." You've been her teacher for 2 years. I'm sorry I don't know a Mary, do you have a picture of her? I grabbed my phone and opened gallery. I started looking through the images and all of her pictures were gone. Any selfie she sent that I screenshotted just wasn't there. Then I noticed something strange. We went to a national park last weekend. I requested the day off. We had a stranger take a picture of us in front of a statue at the hub per idea. I have that picture but she wasn't in it. I was just standing there smiling by myself. I almost dropped my phone. At this point I was breaking. I looked up at the professor and apologized and excused myself before I was about to fall apart. I sprinted outside, my breath out of control. Nothing felt real. I scrolled through my entire phone and nothing. Any pictures we were in together, it was just me. Some I was even doing a weird hand placement like I was relaxing my arm on an invisible person. Nothing of just her. I called my mom in a panic, just trying to get something to ground me. She's met her dozens of times, she has to know. It rang, and rang, and rang, and finally, "Hey sweetie, what's up? You okay? Hey mom, do you know Mary Fulbright? No, am I supposed to? Oh, okay, thanks anyways, I'll talk to you later. Love you." I quickly hung up the phone. I spent the last week looking for any evidence of her existing. It felt like my mind was fractured and nothing was real. Maybe Andrew was made up, maybe my job was made up. Maybe this is a like Shutter Island and I'm in a mental hospital. I felt like I should be in one. Hell, I was about to check myself in if it wasn't for me going back home and looking at a picture. All the pictures of her weren't there anymore, like they never were there in the first place. Our lease only had my signature. All her school work and clothes aren't on the desk or closet anymore. I was defeated until I looked at my desk after sitting on the couch shell-shocked like I just lived through D-Day. Trying to figure out why my memory of her was so vivid. So detailed. Until I saw a picture. She wasn't in it, but it was a picture of me on the couch. She loved that picture of me. The thing was, she was the one who took it. If she didn't take it, who did? It was the only evidence I had to show that she was real. That I wasn't crazy. I've been researching ever since. People's disappearances. People's stories. Seeing if there's anyone with something like mine. That's why I'm writing this post. I found a couple of stories online, no connection to Mary, but the people were saying the same thing. Their significant other disappearing out of the blue. Their fear of going insane. Some lost their minds. Others moved on. I found a small group still looking, still believing. I have a ticket to Peru. That's where one of them, someone who is going through something similar, his name is Tom, is at. He said that there's a lead of someone who might know what's going on. A shaman or something. I don't know, I don't care. I will find you, Mary. That's why I'm posting this on Reddit. Mary, if you are reading this by chance, I know you exist. I'm looking for you. I'll find you, I swear. I'm not crazy. I will find you. Story 3. I'm a ride operator for a theme park. There's one roller coaster we are not allowed to operate. I've always been obsessed with roller coasters. There's just something about the way they defy gravity, defy death, rush you to the very brink, teetering at the edge where anything can go wrong, yet somehow everyone returns safe and sound at the end. At least most of the time, right? There are some roller coasters that have been famously dangerous. Like the Jetline in Sweden, a popular coaster that ran for decades, but after replacement parts weren't properly tested, one of the coaster's trains derailed, fatally. Or at Six Flags, where a restraint on the Texas Giant coaster came undone and a woman was flung from the ride to her death. In my town there's a small Six Flags style theme park. I won't tell you the name, but you've probably heard of it in the news recently. In any case, it's mostly rides and carnival games. I've been an operator there for the past few months. But there's one roller coaster that no passengers are allowed to ride. It's funny because I see them test running it all the time. One day I even went and asked a fellow staff member, Markeisha, when they were going to open the new coaster. She said, never, and I couldn't tell if she was serious or joking. I asked her again. She said with a shrug, boss says, the ultimate, has got some sort of bug. Anyway, fast forward a couple months and Markeisha and I are kind of casually dating. She's nerdy, snarky, and a few years older than I am. We're pretty different, but maybe that's why we get along. One thing that unites us is our passion for roller coasters. The Ultimate still isn't open, and one afternoon she suggests that maybe we ride it ourselves after the park closes. Wait, for real? I exclaim. Yeah, I mean last time everything got safety checked it passed all the checks. Plus I saw someone on it yesterday when it was running. There's literally nothing wrong with it. I think it's just superstition the boss won't open it to the public. He's convinced it'll go wrong, like the first time, he says. The idea of there being some flaw in the Ultimate's design that could be dangerous gave me pause. But Marquisha was at least as well versed as I was in all the ways theme park rides can kill you. Anytime there was news of another theme park death, we'd talk about whether it fit into our top 10. Mechanical failures, obviously, are big on our list. And design failures, like the water slide that decapitated a 10-year-old boy. Then there are human errors. We often argue whether to count fatalities from visitors trespassing in fenced-off areas and then getting whacked by mechanical parts. I don't really count these since, well, it's kind of like when people play on train tracks. Not to be mean about it, but in those situations you can't really blame the rides. Anyway, the Ultimate didn't have any mechanical issues or design flaws, so in theory it should be safe. Like Marcus had said, it had recently been tested for any engineering problems and passed with flying colors. It ran smoother than our flagship roller coaster, the Cobra. Neither Marquisha nor I had pre-existing health issues. And the design of the Ultimate was nothing extraordinary. It had only one giant loop and, further on, a smaller one. Despite the name, it was actually less intense than the Cobra, our most popular coaster. Probably the coolest thing about it was its design. A jet black roller coaster with sinuous curves like a serpent. So anyway, Marquisha and a friend of hers, Carlos, and I all agreed to meet after the park closed and try out the Ultimate. Staff were still cleaning up around the park, but it was deserted of visitors. When I went to meet Carlos at the main entrance, I remember Carlos and I walking toward those ominous black loops of the Ultimate and seeing the coaster running as Marquisha put it through one more test run. Either another employee or a test dummy was in it as it shot by. It was very fast. Not fastest in the world, but damned if it wasn't fastest in the park. Dude, that thing is awesome, exclaimed Carlos. When we got to the ride's entrance, Marquisha told me everything checked out fine and that she and Carlos would go first. I started to object, but she said, "Nah, I get first dibs. I'll run it for you again after." "Woohoo, let's do this," said Carlos. Like all modern roller coasters, pretty much everything was automated after pushing the button for it to go. The main part of my job was the safety checks beforehand, making sure everyone was strapped in, nothing loose, no belongings to go flying off and hurt someone, etc. I sighed and performed the requisite safety checks on Marquisha and Carlos, tugging their harnesses to make sure they were strapped in. The rest of the train was, of course, empty. Come on, let's go," hooted Marquisha. "Let's do this," shouted Carlos. I pressed the button and sent them on their way. The coaster began, its two passengers shouting and waving, and slowly ascended the incline to the park's most precipitous drop. I watched, trying not to feel envy. Oh, I'd get my turn. But I burned with the desire to go first. I watched as that sleek black train climbed to the very top, hung for a moment at the peak, and dropped like a bullet. Screams from my two friends as they plunged. Their hands up, waving, laughter on their faces as they flashed by. And then they were looping. I lost sight of them for a moment from the operator area, so I came out from under the roof and looked up. They were heading toward the second loop, but, oddly there was another passenger, somewhere at the back of the train car. But I could have sworn it was empty when they boarded the ride. As they spiraled into the second loop, I waited for renewed screams and laughter, but the roller coaster looped silently, winding on this hypnotic track, and then taking the big slow circle around back to the start. Not a sound from it. The click-clack of the train's arrival and then the hiss of brakes. At the front I could see Marquisha and Carlos slumped in their seats. No one else in the train with them. And no movement from either of them. I did not immediately go to unbuckle them. I was too much in shock. Because why weren't they moving? Were they both unconscious? Had they hit their heads, been jostled too hard? But the ride looked so smooth. Suddenly another infamous roller coaster came to mind. One that had been designed but never constructed. Marquisha and I used to debate about whether it would be fantastic or terrifying to ride, the euthanasia coaster. The idea is that 24 riders board and pass through 7 loops, and when the ride comes to a stop, they are all dead. The roller coaster's loops become tighter and tighter, the G-forces inducing prolonged cerebral hypoxia, insufficient oxygen to the brain. If you were a rider on it, you'd pass out, and be dead before coming to the ride's end. To me, the concept is horrible. Markeisha always said it would be a terrific way to die. I still didn't have the courage to approach her or Carlos. There was another staff member walking by outside the ride, pushing a drinks cart. I screamed for help. She came up and went to the roller coaster and swore and then got on the phone. Emergency services arrived and unstrapped Markeisha and Carlos. The next day, the park opened as normal. The incident didn't even make the news until much later, since there were no traumatized crowds or blood or cleanup. Just the 2 bodies unstrapped and quietly carried away, and a roller coaster that remained out of commission, as it had always been. I'm haunted by the fact mine was the hand that pushed the button. But the ultimate was examined and all test runs with dummies proved safe. There's no explanation. The ride remains closed due to the bug that Markeisha mentioned to me back before she decided we should try to ride it. The bug has become kind of an urban myth among the staff there. They test the coaster again every once in a while, running it without anybody on it. They never put anybody on it. But I learned later that the bug isn't a design flaw, per se. What the boss calls the bug is actually a passenger. A rider that can always be seen in one of the seats near the back, even when the coaster runs with no one in it. A passenger who always appears after the first loop. At least, it used to be a single passenger. Story 4. I think something terribly wrong is going on with the clinic I work at. Hi everyone. I wonder if anyone will read this, but thank you if you do. Something weird has been going on at work and I just feel lost. I feel all sorts of things, really. I'm not sure what to think, or who to talk to. I saw that some people post here to talk about things they can't really talk about anywhere else. I thought I would give it a try. I'm not the type to be very open about the irrational, so I'm not sure how to approach this. I thought about trying therapy, but they would probably just assume that I am crazy. Except this time, I want to get it out of my head, get it out there, anywhere. I'll try to keep it short and to the point, so it doesn't take too long to read. Before all of this, I lived in a tiny town in the middle of fields and forests. It had its charm, I won't deny that, but it didn't feel like I was made for this type of life. I'll be honest, I felt helpless, like I had no potential of a future there. As a high school student, there were very few job options open for us. Either we worked at one of the 2 tiny restaurants, the grocery store, or one of the 3 gas stations. That's right, we had 3 gas stations, which we all thought was excessive considering that we could cross the town from one side to the other by foot within an hour. Anyway, I ended up working at a family diner. Once I finished high school, I stayed there for a few more months, so I could save up more money. Then, I moved to the city I live in now. Life is very different here, 400 kilometers away from home. There are hundreds of thousands of people. It's always loud, always moving. As soon as I arrived, despite having a good amount of savings in my account, I went looking for a job. 3 days later, I officially got hired at a small convenience store. I was lucky to find something so quickly. I wasn't looking for anything fancy, really. I just wanted anything that would ease my anxiety and my fear of having to go back home if I couldn't afford the life here. My plan was to go to college, study to become a translator, then find a job in that field. Unfortunately, after a year of studying, I accepted that I wouldn't be able to handle it. Long story short, my will to live was gone. I couldn't afford groceries, rent and all the costs related to college, and I had no energy, ever. So I gave up. I quit college and kept working. After 2 more years, I decided to look for another job, something more permanent. It took a while. Finding a job in a city where every place is filled to the brim with employees isn't easy. If anyone tells you, you'll see, they're looking for employees everywhere. Well, that person is full of shit. I applied to over 100 places, and only got 2 responses back. I had an interview with a clothing store which didn't lead anywhere. One night, a notification lit up my phone screen. I received an email from the Timeless Beauty Center, saying that they were hiring me. No interview, no nothing. They wanted me to start the next day. The job is pretty simple. I'm basically a receptionist for a plastic surgery clinic and for a photography studio. I know what you're probably thinking. I also thought it was weird when I got hired, but it quickly became normal to me. The two businesses are owned by the same woman. I've never met her, but I heard that she is your typical rich, snobby woman. Not the type of person I would get along with, not the type to give me a second glance. If you come in the Timeless Beauty Center, you'll find yourself in a wide, shiny, white hallway. The walls, the floor, the furniture, it's all pure white, almost blinding. After walking a few steps, you'll then be in front of my desk, facing me. To my left, a door leads to the photography studio, and to my right, you guessed it, is another door that opens in the plastic surgery clinic. I answer calls, schedule appointments and welcome in customers and patients. I have other tasks, of course, but I'm just trying to give you a little summary of what I do so you can understand the basic idea of my job. I couldn't tell you how skilled our photographers are, because I've never seen any of the pictures they take. I never questioned that. I don't know what the laws related to photography are. Maybe they aren't allowed to share pictures taken of people in a private studio. Our surgeons, however, are incredibly good at what they do. I mean it. The patients that come in look completely different once they come out a few days later. They can do anything and everything, to a point where it's almost creepy. I'm talking facial surgery that leaves no scarring at all, entirely changing the face shape of a person. They do hair transplants that seem so natural, nobody would guess that it isn't real. That's not all they do, though. Jaw surgery, liposuction, you name it, the list goes on. For example, a lady came in one afternoon, saying she had an appointment under the name of Stephanie with Dr. Stevens. So as per the procedure, I hand her a form to fill in while I call the doctor to let him know that his next patient is here. I'm not sure what her appointment was for, since I never read people's files. It felt disrespectful, like an invasion of privacy. I would technically be able to find out if I wanted, but that would involve snooping further into the system than I was allowed to. Stephanie was an average height, slim woman with short black hair. Her teeth were slightly crooked, but most people would never notice, too captivated by her deep green eyes. Dr. Stevens came to let her into the clinic and I went on with my day, welcoming in more clients for either one of the two businesses. I don't usually remember patients, if I'm being honest, but I remembered her. I am a simple, 20-years-old man, alright. When I see a beautiful woman, well, I remember her. So, 2 days later, when a tall, red-headed woman came to my desk to check out of the clinic, I was astonished. There stood Stephanie, at least 4 inches taller than she originally was. Her hair reached her hips, and her skin now had freckles that I could swear she didn't have before. My eyes observed every aspect of her new appearance until they landed on her teeth. They were perfectly straight. A weird feeling settled in the back of my lungs. Did she get fake teeth? I had no doubt that Dr. Stevens would be capable of doing such a realistic-looking job, but still, it weirded me out. She looked at me with a tint of amusement in her eyes. Her eyes, they looked different. They were still green, but I promise I'm not kidding when I say that they were a completely different shade. You know that cartoonish green, toxic liquid, color. It was exactly like that. I thought I was mistaken. There was no way she could be the same Stephanie, but no, she was the same woman from 2 days ago. There was no doubt, such was confirmed when her information perfectly matched the one written in the computer system. That stayed with me for a while after, honestly. I'm not the most knowledgeable when it comes to science, but that seemed impossible to me. I mean, changing eye colors like that, and height. Still, I tried not to think about it too much. The surgeons are the professionals, I'm just the receptionist, I need to mind my business. Part of me didn't want to ask questions, afraid that I would be fired and without a source of income. So what if I didn't understand the lengths of surgery? I brushed the doubt out of my mind and kept on working as usual. A few weeks later, I welcomed in a gorgeous young woman. I'm talking long black hair, beautiful brown eyes decorated with flawless makeup, and a figure that would make everyone in the room notice her. I wondered if she was a model. Welcome in. What can I help you with today? I asked. Hi. I'm here for my photo shoot. It's under the name of Ella. She replied with a smile, her shiny white teeth contrasting with her black lipstick. I handed her a form to fill and told her that her photographer would be with her soon, gesturing towards the waiting area of the hall. Ella took the document and looked at me, her expression changing slightly. "Are you sure you don't need my phone number?" she said with a glint in her eyes. "We already have it in our files, don't worry," I responded. She tapped on my desk with her fingers, smiling playfully. She chuckled, took a pen and wrote her number on a small piece of paper I had on my desk. She then winked and walked away, before taking a seat and beginning to fill out her form. I wasn't used to being flirted with at work. Most people's minds were entirely focused on their appointment. I must have looked really stupid, because I don't even remember responding. I'm pretty sure I just stared at her with my mouth slightly open, trying to formulate a response. I stood there like an idiot for an embarrassingly long moment, before shaking my head and picking up the phone to call in the photographer. A few minutes later, Ella was brought in the studio. As she walked past my desk, she winked at me again. I smiled at her and put her number in my pocket. Part of me thought this was ridiculous. This is my workplace, not a middle school classroom, but still, I couldn't help but hope that something good would come of it. I wasn't the social type, I still am not. I don't go to bars, nor go to parties, so I don't usually end up with a woman's phone number. God, this is embarrassing to admit. The day got pretty busy. It seemed like it would never calm down, but sure enough, less and less people started coming in, giving me time to clean up and close the hall for the night. I was mindlessly sweeping the floor, simply relieved that the day was over, when my mind started to wonder. I hadn't seen Ella leave the building after her appointment. I had really wanted to make up for the first impression she got of me. I wanted to wish her a good evening, at least, maybe even invite her to go out for coffee together. I let out a sigh. Sure, it wasn't that big of a deal, but I was still disappointed. What if she changed her mind about me? I rolled my eyes, then kept cleaning. After I finally left, I pulled the note out of my pocket and sent Ella a text. It simply said, "Hey. It's Zach, the receptionist. I thought I would see you again after your photo shoot, but I must have missed you." I put my phone back into my pocket and started walking back home. The lights coming from other parts of the building still illuminated the streets around it. It was always like this. Some employees left much later than I did, despite the reception closing at 9 p.m. It seemed weird to me, but again, I assumed they probably had paperwork to fill and whatnot. It's hard to know what has to be done in a plastic surgery clinic after closing time when you don't work in there. I got home, ate something, then took a shower. After all this, I settled in bed. For once, I felt happy. I felt hopeful. Honestly, I couldn't stop glancing at my phone to see if Ella had responded, but she hadn't. She didn't reply that night, nor the day after. Days passed without a response and I assumed she changed her mind. I was disappointed, I admit, but it happens. It wasn't the end of the world. I got busy at work again, and I quickly stopped thinking about her. Despite my job technically being monotonous, little interactions here and there with people made each day a little bit different from the other, which I appreciated. This morning, something happened that truly freaked me out. The day had been boring, nothing out of the ordinary or truly interesting happened. I was taking a sip of my coffee, when a woman made her way around my desk and stood in front of me. "I'm here to check out," she said happily. My coffee caught in my throat and I had to try really hard to keep it from coming back up. I swallowed, feeling the liquid slowly, painfully go down my throat. The woman, she looked like Ella. Not exactly like her, no, some of her features were different. She was shorter and her smile was entirely different, but she undeniably looked eerily similar to her. Sure thing. Under what name? I finally asked, hoping the woman standing in front of me would somehow be Ella. "It's under the name of Sophie. I came in a few days ago for my surgeries," she answered. My breath caught in my throat. I looked her up in the system and, sure enough, a short blonde woman with light blue eyes had come in 4 days ago. Except, Sophie wasn't blonde anymore. Her hair was long and black, and her eyes were now a deep shade of brown that I hadn't been able to forget the sight of since I last saw them on Ella's face a week ago. I held my breath, trying to push down the wave of nausea that was dangerously making its way up my throat. As soon as she left, I fell to the floor, bent over the trash can, and I threw up. It was undeniable. For fuck's sake, those eyes were Ella's eyes. That hair was her hair. But they were on a completely different woman. That made no sense. I stayed on the floor for a while longer, clutching my stomach, heavy breathing. Fortunately, nobody else came in that night. I didn't even clean the hall. I locked the front door and I left. I don't even think I turned off the lights. I ran home as fast as I could. I'm in bed now and I can barely breathe. I sent an embarrassing amount of texts to Ella's number, begging her to respond, to say anything, but she isn't responding. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. Typing this all down was harder than I thought it would be. I'm trying to be rational, I swear, but how can I make sense of this? The new eyes, the new teeth, all those new features people come out with after their surgeries, they have to come from somewhere, right? Just, please, help me make sense of this. I swear, I'm not crazy, but I can't shake the feeling that something could have happened to Ella. If you have any idea, any rational explanation, anything, please tell me. Story 5. The Price of Brotherhood. My name's Chuck, and in the fall of 1996, I was an 18-year-old freshman at the University of Alabama, wide-eyed and desperate to fit in. I'd grown up a farm boy in a small town, the kind where everybody knows your business, and college was my shot at becoming the first in my family to make it out into the big bad world. I wanted to be somebody. When my mama first got sick, I remember always thinking I could get smart enough to cure her. That didn't pan out, but my sense of optimism didn't break apart because of it. I just tried to motivate myself even more. That's why I rushed Delta Kappa Epsilon, or DKE, the fraternity with the best parties, the best connections, and the kind of reputation that could open doors for someone like me. I didn't realize back then that some doors lead to places you can never come back from. During rush where groups of kids go house to house and sort of man-flirt their way into the right fit, I'd mentioned my dad was a Clemson alumni, so the brothers all took to calling me Stripes, both because Clemson's mascot was the tiger and also because a cowardly tiger shows his true stripes at some point. The two schools were pretty big football rivals. Pledging started out like I expected. Me and the other pledges, 20 of us, all nervous and trying to act tough, got dragged out of our dorms at 2 a.m. by brothers in ski masks. They loaded us into vans, blindfolded, and drove us to some backwoods field. The air smelled like pine needles and cheap beer, and when they ripped off our blindfolds, we were standing in a circle of tiki torches, the brothers screaming at us to chug warm natty light or do push-ups in the mud until our arms gave out. When one pledge puked, another pledge had to chug a mouthful of beer to spit it in his face to wake him back up. It was humiliating, sure, but it felt like a rite of passage. I'd seen Animal House. I thought I knew what I was in for. Gross I could handle. I grew up on a farm after all. My best friend in the pledge class was Tommy. He was from Mobile, a lanky kid with a quick laugh and a knack for diffusing tension. We bonded the first weekend when we both got stuck cleaning the frat house kitchen after a party, scrubbing vomit off the linoleum while the brothers laughed and threw bottle caps at us. Tommy was the kind of guy who'd crack a joke about it, make it bearable. "We're basically Cinderella, man," he'd say, grinning. "Just waitin' for our fairy godmother to show up with a cup for the keg." Tommy was pre-med as well, so we got into a good habit of studying together at the libraries before line-ups. He was poor too, but he never asked for anything. "I'm just happy to be doing this, man. It's like a movie." Our pledge educator, a fancy title for the brother in charge of training us on how to be brothers, was a senior named Kurt, a larger-than-life guy who loved chain-smoking cigarettes and playing darts. Most of the information we learned seemed important at the time. What year did DKE arrive on campus? Who were our founding fathers? But in reality, no one really remembered this shit after graduation. What I remembered most about Kurt was the time incident. See, midway into the process, two pledges get selected to show up to the house after a line-up, the smartest and the best drinker. This is right after the pledge ed gets fired for us not learning fast enough, something dramatized and something that happens for every single pledge class, regardless of how well they're doing with retaining dumb dates and facts. Tommy and I were the ones selected here. Tommy was the better drinker. I'd been doing the best on the weekly tests at lineup, and they immediately spouted out a super long quote to us and then asked us what time it was if we couldn't recite the quote back perfectly. We took a shot of Jameson from a nearly full handle in front of us. The quote itself was challenging, but the hard part was trying to memorize it before the alcohol hit our systems. Tommy got it surprisingly fast, in a little under 10 tries, while I hadn't even gotten through the first half. "You can leave now, Tommy, I know you've got class tomorrow, or you can stay here, and every time you go that's another chance for Chuck to hear the full quote," Kurt said with a dark gaze to his eyes. "I reckon I'll stay then," Tommy said solemnly, giving me a knowing glance before rattling off the quote once more. I got close, for whatever that was worth, but as the alcohol sunk in, both of us became sloppier and sloppier until eventually that handle was gone. Two of us had drank it and it was gone. No one ever fucks it up this bad. Kurt seemed furious, as he reached for another handle to put up on the table. Thankfully, the other brothers stopped him, but I could see in his eyes this was genuine anger. I don't remember much of the rest of the night, but I'm grateful I survived. Tommy and I were quick to pull trigger after we left the event, and fell asleep in his dorm, puking into buckets and regretting the full day of classes to come. The hazing got worse as the weeks went on. They'd wake us up at random hours, make us run laps around the house in our underwear at sunrise, force us to recite the Greek alphabet while they dumped ice water on us. I nearly dropped out when during one event one of the brothers announced loudly he was going to piss on us. "Take your pick, pledges. It only has ta, be one of you." Our pledge class president, a position of unwanted responsibility, more than anything to be proud of, was a kid named Marty from Los Angeles, a lean dude with an unbreakable smile, and he quickly turned to scan over our ranks before pointing his finger at me. "You never have to do any of the hard stuff, Chuck." Others started to agree, only for Tommy to jump into my rescue right as I found myself preparing to walk. "Chuck's got a girl waitin' on him later. I'll do it, I don't care, it all washes off, right?" I loved Tommy in that moment, but I didn't fully comprehend the sacrifice he'd made. He'd shown he was willing to put his neck on the line for us, and no one was going to forget that. The next night for lineup, they lined us up in the basement and made us sing some of the old DKE drinking anthems while holding lit candles in a human pyramid while in our underwear. If you messed up a word, they'd take the candle from your hand, press the hot wax onto your arm. At one point, after fucking up twice in a row, one of the drunker brothers grabbed my arm with a grin and stared me in the eyes as he burnt into my skin. A tiger needs its color, right, stripes. I still have a scar on my wrist from that night. Tommy got it worse because he flinched when they pressed the wax, and they kept doubling the time as punishment. He didn't complain, though. He just winked at me afterward, like it was all part of the game. By the time Hell Week rolled around, we were exhausted. The brothers had us running on no sleep, chugging liquor until we puked, and doing trust exercises that felt more like psychological torture. It started off with just loops of the same annoying song on over and over during lineups or events, which was annoying, but at least it was funny to riff about after. But as time went on, shit got darker. One night they locked us in a room with no lights and played recordings of people screaming, while making us stand in a circle. They told us to confess our worst fears while they mocked us, each pledge getting his own personal taste of torture. I admitted I was scared of ending up alone, a nobody. Tommy said he was afraid of drowning, which got a big laugh from the brothers. "Good to know, pledge," one of them shouted, bumping an elbow playfully into Kurt's side, and I saw a glint in their eyes that made my stomach twist. Hell Week was held at an old plantation house the fraternity owned, about an hour outside Tuscaloosa, not officially registered to the fraternity through any university channels. It was a crumbling relic, surrounded by overgrown fields and a murky creek that smelled like decay. The brothers called it the Lodge, and it was where DKE's initiation rituals had been held for decades. We arrived in a convoy of nondescript cars and beat-up trucks, the 20 of us pledges crammed into the back of 3 of them like cattle. The brothers were different out there, less rowdy, more focused. I thought I saw an older guy who'd always been kind of nice get into an argument early on with our ex-pledge Ed Kurt, and I could have sworn he was actually crying, but that seemed crazy. We were just pledges to them. What was he worried about? Still, something had shifted in the process. Now they didn't joke as much, and their eyes had this intensity that made me feel like I was being watched, judged. The first night at the lodge was brutal. They split us into groups and made us compete in these sadistic games, carrying buckets of rocks across the field, blindfolded, while they tripped us or sprayed us with hoses. If your group lost, you'd get penalties, which meant more drinking or running until you collapsed. When 2 teams were eliminated, they had to each pick a member to take a hit in the balls from Kurt, who for the course of Hell Week had retitled himself Hazemaster General. Tommy and I were in the same group, and we kept each other going. He'd whisper stupid jokes when the brothers weren't looking, and I'd help him up when he stumbled. We were a team, you know. I thought we'd make it through together. They had us staying in a large closet more or less, with a table set up in the center meant to take up as much space as possible, and 18 chairs placed around it just tight enough to ensure no one could find the space to lay down. We were allowed to do schoolwork and study fraternity information but nothing else. No going back to our dorms, no going out for food, and even conversations were frowned upon, forcing us to resort to hushed whispers over the sound of a constantly blasting song. The end, by the Doors, that we usually got away with. I learned down the line that newly initiated brothers from the year before were supposed to be finding excuses to sneak in to bring us food throughout the week, but the guys we had were either lazy or hated us. I think at one point we got a bag of chips. For our real dinners, brothers visited local foreign food markets, combining the grossest range of things they could find, ranging from clam juice to sheep stomach and even deep-fried insects, though it was better than drinking on an empty stomach. I tried to keep my spirits up by focusing on classwork. Tommy and I had our lab final the next week, and at least we could study together. The second night was a little scarier. Brothers set up a light bulb in one of the darker corners of the room and would call us in one by one in our underwear, forcing our heads up as our eyes strained against the light, and they'd force us to try to read off the small text on its underside before running us through a bunch of random fraternity knowledge-related questions. When we were wrong, we took a large bite from an onion on our necks, reciting a dumb simple quote, "I'm always wrong, I'm never right, in fact I'll take another bite, sirs." Marty was allergic to onions, so they had him do ghost peppers instead. I could see him growing more and more red, though his stomach was so empty and raw that he couldn't manage to puke up anything. Just a lot of painful dry heaving and retching. Tommy managed to find the silver lining, though. They thought they were gonna starve us, huh? I fucking love onions. The third night was the scariest night I'd experienced so far. Kurt, or Hazemaster General, as he'd been insisting we call him, assigned each pledge someone to go under the light with, whom he referred to as our Thunder Buddy, where both parties needed to know each question. The quizzes got a lot more difficult, and so did the screaming, and they'd purposefully paired people who'd been good at retaining the information with people who weren't in order to ensure fuck-ups all throughout the night. Tommy was my Thunder Buddy luckily, and we did alright, others, not so much. Marty and his Thunder Buddy, a kid from Florida named Sam, spent nearly 2 hours straight in there towards the tail end of the night, coming back to our room well past sunrise. Sam was speechless, shaking as pale as a ghost in the corner, and Tommy skipped over a few seats to check in with him. "You don't have to finish this, man. None of us are gonna stop being your friends. These guys can't actually stop you from just walking out of here, dude. If it's bothering you, just like." A sense of recognition seemed to hit Sam's face, as if he realized for the first time all week this was still possible. "Leave." Marty immediately tried to jump in for damage control, but once the idea was seated in his head, Sam was already packing his bags. The room was silent enough to hear a needle drop, other than Tommy, who kept quietly encouraging Sam despite Marty's attempts to sway him. We'd had a couple of kids drop out by this point, but walking out the door with less than a week left was practically unheard of. Still, Sam had never been as into it as others. He was a legacy, which meant he got an automatic bid because of someone in his family, and frankly I was shocked he'd made it this far. He was way too soft for some of the shit these guys threw at us. As he forced his way through, the brother standing guard at the door, who seemed shocked but made no efforts to stop him, Marty stood from his seat by the door and brazenly tried to shove a finger into his face for one last plea. "Why, you can't just abandon your Thunder Buddy. Do you know what they're going to do to me?" The next morning, we found out. By the time the fourth night rolled around, Marty was on the verge of collapse, pale as paper, shaking consistently, and covered in bruises far beyond child's play. He literally couldn't speak after, but we'd find out later via a handheld camcorder that he'd been singled out for the Gauntlet of Truth, a ritual where he had to recite the fraternity's history flawlessly. Each misstep, be it a stammered date or a forgotten founder's name, brought a swift, punishing blow, either with a paddle or a fist. One senior, his breath heavy with whiskey, landed a stinging backhand across Ethan's cheek when he fumbled the founding year, splitting his lip and knocking out one of his canines in the process. Another brother's paddle thudded into Marty's shin when he missed a Greek letter in the chant, the bone visibly warped through the skin of his scrawny legs come line up that night. A drunken senior describing his knees buckling, but that he was yanked upright by his hair, forced to continue as sweat and blood mingled together, dripping onto the floor whilst he crossed the finish line. The brothers' jeers grew louder, their eyes gleaming with a mix of sadistic glee and tradition-fueled fervor, as Marty's voice cracked but persisted, into a weak semblance of victory. When he crossed the line. Brotherhood. The hazing that followed was by all intents and purposes kind of fun. Questions shifted from fraternity knowledge to sillier things like, which brother gets the most girls? I found myself holding a beer while lined up in the hallway at one point, even cracking a smile as Marty managed to pull off a shotgun despite his hobbled circumstances. Tommy at one point wrapped an arm around my shoulder and pulled me close, the optimism in his voice sending shivers up my spine. Tonight could be the night, man. Tonight we might be done. We weren't. On the fifth night, things changed for the worst. They gathered us in the basement of the lodge, a damp, stone-walled room lit by a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. The air was thick with mildew, and there was this faint, metallic smell I couldn't quite place. The brothers were all there, wearing these creepy black robes with hoods, like something out of a bad horror movie. The chapter president, a senior named Garrett, stepped forward. He was a big guy, pre-law, with a smile that never reached his eyes. Tonight, he said, we separate the men from the boys. DKE isn't just a fraternity. It's a brotherhood forged in sacrifice. If you want to be one of us, you have to prove you're willing to pay the price. I thought he meant more hazing, maybe something worse than before. I was wrong. They handed each of us a knife, small, sharp, with a bone handle carved with the DKE crest. Garrett explained the ritual. The lodge demands loyalty, he said. It demands blood. Every pledge class gives something to keep the balance. Those who give the most are rewarded. Those who don't, well, they don't belong. He gestured to the floor, and I noticed for the first time that there were stains on the stone, dark, uneven patches that looked too much like dried blood. My heart was pounding, but I told myself it was just theatrics. Frats did weird stuff, right? Secret handshakes, creepy rituals, it was all part of the mystique. But then Garrett called out 5 names, including Tommy's. They had each been selected by cabinet for some slight or wrong answer, an unwarranted chuckle, or maybe even because they just looked at someone the wrong way. The chosen pledges were led to the center of the room, and the rest of us were told to stand against the walls. The brothers started chanting in a language I didn't recognize, low and guttural, like a prayer to something ancient. Tommy looked at me, his eyes wide, and I saw real fear there for the first time. They blindfolded the 5 pledges and tied their hands behind their backs. Garrett said, the lodge has chosen. To join us, you must offer a sacrifice. One of these 5 will pay the price tonight. The rest of you will decide who. My stomach dropped. This wasn't hazing. This was something else, something wrong. I wanted to run, to grab Tommy and get the hell out, but the brothers were watching us, their knives glinting in the dim light. They gave us a choice. Pick one of the 5 to die, or the ritual would claim more. The lodge always gets its due, Garrett said. If you don't choose, it chooses for you. The other pledges were panicking, whispering, trying to figure out what to do. Some guy, a scrawny kid named Ryan, started crying and saying he didn't sign up for this. A brother slapped him hard and told him to shut up. I looked at Tommy, blindfolded and kneeling in the center of the room. I wanted to save him, I swear I did. But I was scared of dying, scared of losing everything I'd worked for. DKE wasn't just a frat, it was a ticket to a better life. Garrett had told us stories about alumni who were CEOs, senators, guys who ran the world because of the connections they'd made here. I wanted that. I needed it. The pledges started arguing, throwing out names. Some said Ryan, because he was weak, always whining. Others pointed at a guy named Chris, who'd mouthed off to the brothers one too many times. But a few kept looking at Tommy, saying he was too soft, too much of a joker. I tried to defend him, but my voice was shaking, and nobody listened. The brothers didn't care who we picked, they just wanted it done. In the end, we voted. It was anonymous, scraps of paper dropped into a box. I wrote Ryan's name, I swear I did. But when Garrett counted the votes, Tommy's name came up the most. I don't know if it was rigged, or if the other pledges really turned on him. Maybe I should have fought harder, screamed, done something. But I didn't. I just stood there, frozen, as they untied Tommy and led him to a stone altar at the far end of the basement. The chanting got louder, and Garrett raised his knife. Tommy was sobbing now, begging, saying he didn't want to die. I couldn't look at him, couldn't face the betrayal in his eyes. The brothers told us this was the final test. If we wanted to be DKE, we had to participate. They handed me the knife and told me to make the first cut. You're his thunder buddy, and I did. My true fucking stripes finally showed. I fucking did it, okay. It's hard to find the words to describe it, but I felt like I was outside my body, watching someone else move my hand. I told myself it was just a test, that they'd stop it at the last second. But they didn't. I won't describe what happened next. I can't. The sounds, the smells, the way the room seemed to pulse with something alive and hungry, it's all burned into my brain. When it was over, Tommy was gone, and the brothers were clapping, saying we'd finally proven ourselves. They told us the lodge was pleased, that we'd secured our futures. Jobs, money, power, it was all ours now, sealed in blood. The end of Hell Week was a blur. They burned Tommy's clothes in a bonfire and swore us to secrecy. The lodge protects its own, Garrett said. But it punishes traitors. I didn't sleep for days, seeing Tommy's face every time I closed my eyes. I thought about running, going to the cops, but what could I say? Who'd believe me? DKE had alumni everywhere, cops, judges, politicians. I'd seen the photos on the walls of the lodge, generations of brothers smiling like they knew they were untouchable. I stayed. I became a brother. They gave me a pin, a handshake, a place at the table. The other pledges who made it through never talked about that night, but I saw it in their eyes, the same guilt, the same fear. We were bound by what we've done, and there was no going back. Now, I'm 47, with a corner office at a law firm in Birmingham. I've got a wife, 2 kids, a house with a pool. I'm living the American dream, just like Garrett promised. But every year, when the leaves turn and the air gets crisp, I think about Tommy. I think about the choice I made, the knife in my hand, the blood on the stone. I wonder if I could have saved him, if I could have run and never looked back. But I didn't. I chose this life, and I paid the price. So did Tommy. And the worst part, if I had to do it again, I'm not sure I'd choose any different. Brotherhood, man. Arlight, if you listen this story until story 5, drop comment and let me give you bonus of other story. Night shift nightmare. Hi all, I am currently writing this at 4:21 after just getting home from my night shift early. This happened to me tonight and hopefully I'll feel better after I write this out. I have a day job where they offered night shift for a limited project. This ended but I realized I enjoyed the night shift and started hotel work. Just doing general admin and late check-ins. I normally am buddied up, but today I was alone. I wasn't scared because I've done this prior. An hour into my night shift there was a buzz on the intercom. This was weird because I had no one left to come in at the start of my shift, and all guests have keys to open the main door. I answered, asking if she had keys. She replied no in a baby voice, which instantly gave me shivers. I activated my SOS button, which we have at all times. She repeatedly asked me to come in to just chat to me. After I let her down gently, she left. I still felt weird. About an hour later some regular guests came down for a smoke and I asked to join them and lightly explain why I hadn't gone myself because of what happened earlier. I joined them outside quickly and decided to go back inside. When I did, the men re-entered, describing the bald women I described sprinting for the doors. I notified my SOS, which lead them to calling the police. The police are very close to us, so I thought it would be dealt with quick. It turns out that although I thought she left, she just camped where cameras couldn't see. For the next hour I was back and forth with the police, ambulance and my managers. Then it took a turn. She rang the intercom again. The police advised me to not answer. This led her to taking a cup she found on a bar bench and smashing it at the glass doors. I fled to the safe area and pleaded for the police to take me seriously. She had turned aggressive. As a tiny girl in her early 20s I was in pieces, I won't lie. This is because I knew something was wrong from the start, even after mentioning it to my boyfriend who was on the phone during the intel meeting. Whilst on call to the authorities she was running towards the doors repeatedly, chanting and mumbling to herself. The police, who were situated across the street, still had no sign of coming. She would stand directly in front of my desk even though I was not in sight due to lockdown. She was still making eye contact with the camera. She then sat crisscross towards the glass doors playing with a metallic object in her hand. This is when my mental breakdown turned into survival rage. I was on the phone to the general manager and the police, describing this sharp object that she was now trying to pry open the door with. The door slightly opened, which led me to question the police's care about my safety. After both my manager and the operator told me to calm down and that the safe area would be secure if she got inside, I absolutely flipped, explaining how of course they were calm since the operator was behind a desk at the station across me and how my manager was in bed. I had just finished university and got an internship. How compared to the 50-year-old manager I was a fucking baby. My mum's baby. And that I was done with the excuses and downplays. By the end of my meltdown I heard sirens and my manager had sent another to come in. She was arrested due to the sharp object in fact being a weapon. I honestly just got up and left. The police said there seems to be no reason for this episode. The managers and police tried to comfort me, but the truth is that this all took place within hours of my initial SOS. Please take this as a sign to trust your gut. I'm really shaken up and scared. Please be safe. Sorry for any spelling or grammar mistakes.
Thank you for spending your night with me. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and comment where you're listening from. And if you want more rain-soaked nightmares, check out the next video. Sleep tight, if you can.